This is Jessie, and you're listening to the Curious Cabinet Podcast. Hey everyone, I hope you had a good week. Welcome back to the show. Nothing much going on over here. There's been crazy weather on the east coast of USA that I've been paying attention to. All that snow, it's crazy. Sicily just had insane landslides. If you've seen that, they got hammered by some rain, and it's awful. Parts of a town are evacuating. It's crazy. But other than that, I won't get into political stuff on here, but but anyway, so today's case is a case that has become more popular over the years, and I just think it's important to talk about because there has really been no justice for this family. And today I'm going to talk about the Jack family who disappeared in British Columbia. Now, first I want to actually talk about some of the stuff that was happening to the indigenous people up there in the past years. So kind of starting in the 60s and 70s, there was just a huge injustice against the indigenous people in British Columbia. This time, the government was trying to kind of gain claims to the land that the indigenous lived on. Their government was trying to pretty much strip the indigenous of their heritage and their culture at the same time. They implemented what they called the 60s scoop, which is just the term for it. It was between the 1950s and the 1980s where child welfare authorities removed thousands of children from their home and placed them with non-indigenous families to be fostered or adopted. They would be taken without any reason or consent from their parents. And these children weren't just placed with a family nearby. They were taken and placed with some families in Canada, but even with families within the United States or in Europe. This caused a huge disconnection with their culture, loss of identity, and the trauma of being stripped away from their home and their family. And there was also a big loss of their native language while being sent to other families. So residential schools were also another guise that the government proposed would help integrate the indigenous into the Euro-Canadian culture. They were often religious and full of massive amounts of abuse and also created more trauma for the kids. They were meant to live there 24/7, and many have commented on how awful these places really were. One politician even said it was meant to kill off the Indian in the child. And many children who attended them didn't even make it home alive. That's how bad these places were. It's just truly awful. So this is just a small touch of the things that the indigenous were up against at this time. There's so many atrocities they endured, especially, in this time period. And the last thing that I'm going to talk about is the Highway of Tears. Now, this is a stretch of highway about 450 miles in Canada where many indigenous went missing. The victims were mostly young girls and women, but not exclusively. The route stretched from Prince George to Prince Rupert in British Columbia. It's an extremely secluded area with victims dating all the way back to 1969. Some victims were never seen alive again, and some were found murdered and their bodies dumped somewhere along this stretch of road. Now, the Jack family is included as victims of the Highway of Tears. So the Jack family included Ronnie Jack, Doreen Jack, and their two sons, Russell and Ryan. The Jack family were both indigenous, Ronnie and Doreen. They were part of the Chislata Carrier Nation. I believe this was a First Nations band from the Burns Lake region in British Columbia. I got like different things like from the region they were from, but I believe that that's the right one. So Doreen Jack was born on April 24th, 1963. Little is known about her early life, but Doreen's sister Marlene has publicly spoken about their childhood. Their mother abandoned them at a very young age and left them in the care of their father. They grew up in a small shack, think like a one-room studio apartment. Their childhood was full of mistreatment and abuse from early on. Their father was an alcoholic, and they said he would party a lot, and he was known to physically abuse Doreen and her two younger sisters. His friends would come over often and also party with him, and some would sexually abuse the girls. Doreen was always just trying to protect her sisters. Eventually, the kids ended up in Jack Lake residential schools, where they endured more abuse and hardships. And after that closed, I think it was like in the 70s, Doreen ended up in a live-in Catholic boarding school. But Marlene said at the residential school, they wouldn't let the sisters speak to each other because they were no longer considered a family to each other. I mean, this broke their bond, but they would still try to find ways to safely talk to each other without getting in trouble. So like I said, after the residential school closed down, they were sent to a Catholic boarding school, which I believe was pretty much the same type of abuse and mistreatment. From information I have read, and I'm not 100% sure about this, so don't quote me. It's just I read it a couple places, but it's not everywhere, so I don't know. But Doreen had been raped, and the assault led to a pregnancy. And soon, she would give birth to a baby boy, who she named Russell, and that was in February 28th of 1980, when she was 17. Ronnie Jack was born on March 29th, 1963. Now, not much is known about his childhood either, but it seemed like him and his mom had a close relationship. Ronnie's mom, Mabel, said that he and Doreen met while living in the Catholic high school that they were both attending. Ronnie and Doreen had an off and on again relationship while they were in high school, but 2 years after she had Russell, she moved into Ronnie's house that he lived in with his mother. He quickly accepted Russell as his own, and eventually they had another child named Ryan on July 26, 1985. Mabel said that they were a happy couple without any problems in the beginning of the relationship. They were always good to each other, and everything seemed to be good. But financial trouble struck when Ronnie had to take off of work for a long period of time. While working at the sawmill, he hurt his back severely, which caused him to lose his job. And they had to go on welfare to survive, but it was nearly not enough. They eventually relocated to Prince George because it was a more populated town, so they figured there would be some better work opportunities, but nothing ever came. Doreen had began drinking heavily, and Marlene said she witnessed Ronnie hitting her on more than one occasion. They had become so poor that when the children would get sick, they would have to steal medicine from the pharmacy. And forget about taking them to a doctor. There was no way they could afford that. So they would just hope that the stolen medicine would work and that nothing bad would come of it. Which is just, such a sad way to live. Ronnie was so tired of struggling and wanted to give his family the life that they deserved. They had no plan B, no one to help them financially. He had to do it on his own. But soon, Ronnie would receive a job offer, and it would temporarily end his hardship for him and his family. On August 1st, 1989, Ronnie was at a local pub. It was called the First Leader Pub in Prince George. It was only about 4 blocks away from the family's home. And this pub was pretty much a dive. You could find cheap beer, and a lot of unemployed locals would go there. Ronnie had recently become a regular because contractors would come in looking for cheap work. So, word of mouth was a little bit better than actually having to go out and find a job. And this way you would just get paid cash and everything like that. Ronnie would constantly keep an ear out for anyone trying to offer work. So a man came into the pub, a stranger, and somehow ended up talking to Ronnie. He then offered him a short gig at a logging camp, which is great. Ronnie was being the family man he was and told the stranger, he was married. And wow, luckily the man had a job for Doreen too. He said that she could work in the kitchen and help the cook, just being the cook's helper, making dishes for the other families as well. This was like starting to sound like a dream come true. Like, this is exactly what the family needed. But, then he has 2 kids at home. So he let the man know that he and his wife had 2 children. And amazingly, the man said that there was a daycare right at the logging camp. The children could be left to run and play while both the parents were working. Like, this is just a perfect thing. The only thing was that this job was also located in the Clucas Lake area, which was about 40 kilometers west from Prince George. Ronnie didn't have a car, but once again, luckily, this man offered to take Ronnie and the whole family with him in his truck, but only if they left that night. They had to go home, pack their stuff, and leave. So Ronnie rushed home. He was ecstatic. It seemed like it was too good to be true. And it was just finally a relief. Like, that it was a temporary end to their financial problems. It's just what he needed. So it was about 11:16 that night that Ronnie got back to his house. He told Doreen, and she was ecstatic too. He had ended up calling his brother at that time and told him the plans and the offer. He had asked if the kids could stay with him for a couple of days while he was working, but his brother said it just wouldn't work out. And I couldn't imagine how his brother felt after they all went missing, because it's just heartbreaking, like not being able to watch the boys and then them just disappearing. It's so sad. But shortly after, Ronnie also called his parents in Burns Lake, British Columbia, and told them what was going on. He said that they'd be gone from 10 days to 2 weeks, and the kids wouldn't miss too much school by the time they got back, so it was going to be okay. Now, according to the Burns Lakes District News, sorry, that's a crazy thing to say, in 2022, Mabel, Ronnie's mom, said that she was the last one to talk to Ronnie. He said to her, "Mom, I'm going to work near Clucas Lake, and if you don't hear from me, come looking." And something just felt off to her about the whole thing. It was obvious that Ronnie sensed it too, because why else would he say that to his mom? Like, he was so desperate that he took the chance anyway. Around 1:30 a.m. on August 2nd, 1989, neighbors witnessed Ronnie, Doreen, and the children climbing into the mystery man's dark-colored pickup truck outside their home. Doreen's sister, Laureen, went to say goodbye to her before she left in the early hours of August 2nd. She watched them pack their stuff into this man's truck, but she got like a strange feeling, and she just wanted to stay away. And that was the last time that anyone has ever seen the Jack family. Now, after 2 weeks, Ronnie's family started getting concerned, obviously. And without being able to get in touch with anybody, they reported the Jack family missing on August 25th. Now, at first, the RCMP treated this case like the family had run away and decided to leave their lives and start over. The Jack family has stated many times that the whole investigation was mishandled, especially in the beginning. But over the years, it's become more and more obvious that when they vanished, it wasn't by choice. Family believed that in the beginning, the police didn't really care because of their indigenous background, which is probably true. At this time, there was still a huge element of racism, and it was very apparent. Across Canada, Indigenous still vanish at a much higher rate than others. And the RCMP doesn't seem to take the initiative that they would with anyone who's not Indigenous. I mean, it's probably changed since the 80s, but I'm sure there's still some element of racism. There always is everywhere. But on the road that they disappeared, that night was the Highway of Tears, like I said earlier. So one of the ways that the RCMP mishandled this case was that on September 7th, the police reported that the family had been found and shut the whole case down. Which is kind of one of the most insane things I've ever heard. Because, you have one job. Your job is to be looking for the missing family, and you say that you found them. That's crazy. This messed up everything so much because this time period was so crucial. They should have been out there searching for them, but no one was doing anything. Just an example of how they treated the case. And it took days for anybody to realize that the case was shut down when a lot more should have been happening. A year later, there was a reenactment that aired on a CKPG TV, but it didn't even reach the area where they had said to have been missing from. So it kind of seemed like more of just a political move than really trying to find them. So in 1992, Prince George Friendship Center and Mabel Jack teamed up to raise some more money and to gain more publicity for the case. So Crime Stoppers ended up donating $2,000 as well, but unfortunately, no solid leads came through. Now, the biggest tip came 7 years after the disappearance. On January 28th, 1996, around 8:30 a.m., a man in Stony Brook, British Columbia, called the Vanderhoof police and said, "The Jack family are buried in the south end of a ranch." The caller hung up after 10 seconds before any questions could even be asked. Investigators posted several public appeals in newspapers all over the area, but this caller never called back, and they released the voice audio of the caller, and nobody ever identified it. The RCMP tracked down the call to the house in Vanderhoof where it came from, but they found out that there was an evening, that evening, that there was a house party taking place. And there's no public information indicating if the caller was found or not, or if any of the searches were made of the property where it came from. I know that they did find some people from the party that night, but nobody knows who called, so I don't think they found the person that actually called. And I wonder if this was just a prank. I don't think it was just a prank. I think somebody knows something. And I think they were drunk and called because of guilt for some reason. Or it might have been something like a guy was fighting with his girlfriend and wanted to shut the party down, and they called the police. Were expecting police to come right away. That was another thing that crossed my mind when thinking about that whole situation. But anyway, in 2018, the RCMP did post in the papers again, asking for the caller to call back. But it's 29 years later, so who knows if the person's even alive or still in the area or anything like that. Now, at one point, they did, I'm assuming it was shortly after the Jack family went missing, go to the logging camp. They asked around, and no one had ever seen them there, which makes it obvious that they never made it and never just disappeared to start a new life. The other thing was that the people at the camp were not familiar with the man described, the large man with the reddish beard. So obviously, this man lured the Jack family, and maybe I don't know if he was maybe stalking. Not stalking the Jack family, but like maybe he went to the bar a couple times and was looking for someone to kill as a serial killer. And like he kind of felt out the situation and all right, perfect. This guy's desperate. He needs work. And under the guise of work, he would kill him, which with Ronnie being semi-inebriated, drinking, he could have been plastered. I'm not too sure, but he obviously had his guard down more than he should have. He was also desperate, but, drinking clearly impaired his judgment. So there have been tons of searches conducted on multiple properties while looking for the family. There have been hundreds of interviews, and they've also obtained thousands of documents related to the case. A well-known sketch has been put together by two separate witnesses at two separate times, and this man is known to be the prime suspect in the case. I'll post these pictures on my social media so you guys can take a look. I'm pretty sure both sketches were made like a little bit after it happened and then a couple of years apart from each other, and they look pretty similar to me, so obviously that's the person they're looking for. In 2019, a search was made on a property south of Vanderhoof on the Sycoos First Nation Reserve. They used ground-penetrating radar, but there were no signs of the Jack family. A rumor was going around that the brother of a Canadian serial killer, Robert Pickton, was responsible. Some say the sketch does resemble David Pickton, but Doreen's sister claims that this theory is just wrong, and people need to focus on finding the real killer and finding the family. I think there's been a couple people who have disproven this, like they were not even near the area at the time. The man is described as 6 foot to 6'6", white Caucasian male, reddish brown hair, and a full beard and mustache, between 200 to 275 pounds. They said his hair went down to his ears. In 1989, he was also 35 to 40 years old. At the time, he was wearing a baseball cap, a red checkered work shirt, faded blue jeans, a waist-length blue nylon jacket, and work boots with leather fringes over the toes. In 2020, age-progressed photos of the family were released in hopes to generate new leads, but also nothing came from it. So, we know that this stranger, that his motive was just to kill. He obviously was targeting either the Jack family specifically or just Indigenous people in general. Highway 16 is also known for a shocking number of disappearances and murders, mostly, like I said before, mostly young women. This place is insanely remote, too, so they could have been murdered and the evidence could have been hidden. There's thousands of acres of dense forest there. So it is very possible that they just haven't found the bodies in the forest yet. Sources say that since 1969, more than 80 girls have gone missing or were murdered there. In 1989 alone, it was the Jack family who went missing. 24-year-old Alberta Williams, she was strangled under an overpass in late August. In October, 15-year-old Cecilia Nickel was last seen near Smithers before she vanished. No body was ever found. An 18-year-old Marnie Blanchard was last seen in Prince George getting into a Toyota pickup truck. Her remains were found a month later on an unmarked dirt road. Another theory that some people might have is that this was human trafficking targeting Indigenous people. Maybe not everyone was killed, maybe just Ronnie, or maybe Ronnie and his wife, or the wife wasn't and they just got separated and moved elsewhere. And then the kids were trafficked. Who knows? But on June 2024, the family organized a search east of Prince George near Willow Lake, acting on new tips. The RCMP didn't want to get involved, though, saying that the tip wasn't strong enough. That's very strange. They brought in search dogs and excavation on their own dime. I think, they've had people help donate and volunteers and stuff like that as well. Their family is determined to get the answers that they deserve. If you know anything about the disappearance of the Jack family, recognize the sketch of the kidnapper, have even the smallest tip, you can contact Prince George RCMP at 250-561-3300. Or you can contact Crime Stoppers British Columbia at 1-800-222-TIPS. Or even you can go online, and I'll post that website in my details about this podcast. And tips can be left anonymously. I really hope that the Jack family finds the answers they deserve. Cases like this just break my heart. Who knows what this poor family went through, and their loved ones are just begging for reconciliation. But thanks for listening to today's episode. Like always, share this with your friends, subscribe to the channel and like it, and check me out on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Oh, and also, if you have a case you might like to hear, shoot me a message or leave a comment on any of my social media, and I'll do my best to cover it for you. Until next week, guys.